Hi everyone, welcome back. It's another episode of Spectator Sports. We're doing it out of a different location than our typical recording location. I'm on vacation, but the grind never stops. Of course, here with Spectator Sports, we're covering action across the NFL. And before we get started, please do me a massive favor. We have some housekeeping that we have to attend to. For those new to the channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done so already, take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages, and you can get the audio from this podcast on Spotify. All links are in the description. We had a lot of juicy matchups across the NFL for week 7, and really was interested to see how Baltimore was going to handle Detroit. Detroit is this upstart team that is ready to make a statement, especially on the road. And the last time we saw these two teams, we saw a lot of fireworks. This was when Dan Campbell was 3 games into his early coaching career, and they did just about everything to win that game, but it took a miraculous kick by Justin Tucker to end it for Detroit as they walked off 18-16 back in 2021, a record-breaking make. And that went off the crossbar, as you know, hung up in the air and went through. But this time, totally different event with the Baltimore Ravens winning quite comfortably 38-6. And really impressive by the Baltimore Raven offense, because we haven't seen it be as great as we wanted it to be, because with this new OC in Todd Monken, they're trying to install a lot of moving parts with Zay Flowers and OBJ, for example. Those are big wide receivers. And of course, you have Nelson Aguilar as well. Those receivers are getting implemented into this offense, and we've seen some clunkiness out of this Ravens offense. But Lamar probably had one of his best passing games of his entire career. I mean, over 350 yards and 4 total touchdowns. I mean, just phenomenal stuff out of Lamar. And this is an MVP type of performance that we haven't seen from him since maybe 2021 or so. Just the last couple of years have been rough with the injuries, right? And this is just great to see that the pass catchers outside of Mark Andrews can take some pressure off of him, because we know Lamar goes to Mark Andrews, and he should. Mark Andrews is a great tight end, and definitely helps out that there are other guys in this team that can take some pressure off of him and be effective downfield. Because when they're pushing the ball, yes, Mark Andrews is going to be available on drag routes or maybe running something about 10 yards deep, but OBJ is a great threat. And then now Zay Flowers, I mean, he's an unbelievable deep threat. We're seeing him slowly blossom, no pun intended with the Flowers thing. And he is becoming more than a gimmicky receiver. I think he has a lot of comparisons that you could see with a guy like Tyreek Hill, that you just get him in motion and just give him the ball in space. He could be very, very concerning for opposing defenses. For Detroit, disappointing performance. Let's just be honest here. I mean, you had all the momentum after winning that opening day game against the Kansas City Chiefs and piling up a few wins. And this doesn't mean that I think they're pretenders, but this was a moment that I think maybe was too big for them. Big test on the road, and this is no team that has any type of injury excuses like what they had against the Kansas City Chiefs that were missing Travis Kelce in that opener. So Detroit has to find a way to respond after getting basically shellacked and embarrassed on the road. I mean, a lot of things were sloppiness. The defense had no resistance at all, and this is really disappointing because Aiden Hutchinson and the entire Detroit defense has been doing pretty well against opposing offenses. But additionally, we have to talk about the offensive line. They have been one of the best in football to start off this year, but this time just not giving Jared Goff adequate time to find receivers. You saw a nice performance, at least stat-wise, by Amon-Ra St. Brown, but that was a lot in garbage time, which was just them trying to get back into the game. I mean, it was 38-6, very, very lopsided affair there. So Detroit has some work to do. I think this is a great win for Baltimore, making an adjustment and getting a quality win over one of the best teams in the NFC. Cleveland and Indianapolis. Now, this is an interesting matchup where we already know that Indianapolis is missing their starting quarterback with Anthony Richardson. He is out for the year with that shoulder injury. He'll be probably getting surgery injury the next coming days, and that means that Gardner Minshew is taking over as the starter for the foreseeable future. And we know that Gardner can be solid, but it's a question whether or not he can be a franchise guy, right? He had stints with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and yeah, he has some good tape out there, but is it contributing to winning? And this game in particular, I think he made a lot of winning plays, but the reason why the Colts lost wasn't his fault. Gardner Minshew is obviously coming from Philadelphia. He used to be the backup quarterback for Jalen Hurts, and he's coming with Shane Steichen over to Indianapolis to bring in this kind of Shane Steichen offense that they used to run in Philly with the Colts. And a lot of times you got to see a lot of concepts that you didn't see with Gardner Minshew. He was on the run. He had a couple nice runs, 2 rushing touchdowns, a passing touchdown later, but he is a sneaky good dual threat quarterback, not an elite guy like Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson, but sneaky good. That we'll say that at least. For the most part in the game, he was very much in command of this offense, and against a Cleveland Browns defense that makes a lot of quarterbacks cringe and make a lot of mistakes. Yes, Gardner had his own mistakes, but they weren't devastating mistakes. They were things that the Colts could recover from. But nonetheless, there were a lot of good things that we saw from the Cleveland Browns despite them having issues at quarterback. Now, we know that their starting quarterback had this mysterious shoulder injury for the last couple of games. He missed those games while he was medically cleared, and he elected to sit himself, which ruffled some feathers with Kevin Stefanski and other brass in the Cleveland Browns organization. But still, he made the start, but was knocked out of the game pretty quickly after being evaluated for concussion. Now, he did clear concussion protocol, but it seemed that the coaching staff wanted to stick with PJ Walker. Now, PJ didn't have the best of games either. He had a turnover, an interception, but looked better than what Cleveland's typical starter would be in that 2-drive set. He was 1 for 5 for an interception as well. Nearly had a second interception that was the throw that knocked him out of the game, but it turns out that pass was incomplete. So not really a lot of damage done there, but still they wanted to stick with PJ Walker after basically guiding Cleveland to a game-winning drive last week against San Francisco. He did so again, but let's talk about the refs. There were a couple key incidents in this game that led to Cleveland pulling out the victory. Firstly, there was a strip sack that was taken off the board, illegal contact downfield, unfortunately wiped out what would have been a game-sealing turnover for that Indianapolis Colts defense. And then the second one was a questionable pass interference. There was a lot of arm battling right there. And the problem is that I have with this call is that the ball seemed uncatchable. When the ball is uncatchable, PI is automatically taken off the board. Now, you can have illegal contact, you can have defensive holding beyond 5 yards. You absolutely are allowed that. When the ball is not in flight, you can be called for defensive holding. But PI is a totally different animal, and I feel like this flag was unwarranted, especially in those circumstances. So set them up 1st and goal at the 1-yard line. Eventually, Kareem Hunt was able to punch it in, go ahead, score. Cleveland sneaks away from Indianapolis with a victory. They go to 4-2. This AFC North is very, very competitive. We've talked about this countless times on this podcast. But, I mean, it is going to be a true dogfight on who comes out. I mean, Cincinnati is rounding into form after a couple nice victories, and you're going to see Joe Burrow get healthy, right? Pittsburgh and that defense can win a ball game. It's just a matter of not whether you're going to see Kenny Pickett pick up from where he left off and continue to progress as a quarterback in this league. The Ravens are putting it together offensively. And the question is for Cleveland is their quarterback situation. I don't think there's really a quarterback controversy just yet. No, because they paid him a ton of money. They're not going to just move off of him for a slight slump, but it is concerning. And if his play continues to be like this, is going to be another Cleveland quarterback that you'll see be maybe overpaid, overhyped, and not bringing a lot of success to the Cleveland Browns. Buffalo and New England. Now, Buffalo isn't looked as good as they were supposed to be after winning that game against the Miami Dolphins. They've struggled against the Jacksonville Jaguars out in London, and then they barely scraped by the New York Giants at home and took a questionable pass interference call that was withheld on the game's final play for them to progress to 4-2. And they're coming into New England as pretty big favorites. I mean, New England has been, let's be honest, they've been trashed this entire season. And their lone win came against the New York Jets, who are still trying to figure themselves out with Zach Wilson, right? So, divisional games, as we know, it can be anyone's game. Teams, despite records, are going to wake up with extra motivation. Either the team with the lower record wants to play spoiler, or that team with the better records is focusing on just getting by, hopefully unscathed because of injuries and whatnot, and getting another conference win. Those are key things that we want out of your team as they continue to progress throughout the NFL season and gearing up for the playoffs. These are battle tests. And unfortunately for the Bills, they failed at this. On the first play from scrimmage for the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, we talked about how he has struggles with ball security. He threw an interception, and that was translated into 7 points the other way for the New England Patriots. Now, Buffalo was able to come back and make this a game, even taking the lead late. But those issues on defense, especially the injuries that have piled up over the last 2-3 weeks, reared its ugly head yet again. They just could not get stops. And New England was able to steal a victory in the closing seconds to win 29-25. I mean, this is an offense that has struggled to even move the ball. They were outscored 72-3 in the last two games, and they put up 29 points against the Bills defense. Yes, they're missing pieces, but this offense for the New England Patriots isn't anything extraordinary. So big red flag. I think for management wise, they need to get new defenders at this trade deadline that's coming up on Halloween, because they need to shore up the secondary. They need to maybe get another linebacker. I think the pass rush, the D-line is going to be okay. Thankfully, I think Rousseau will be back at some point. Von Miller will be implemented, but you still have some good pieces in there. You just have to get some extra help, especially in that linebacking core. For New England, these fire Bill Belichick talks are going to soften for now, but let's be honest, this is a nice victory, but I do expect them to continue to struggle. Now, we heard reports on Sunday morning, at least, that Bill Belichick signed an extension. Now, I don't know if that is going to be on the table if they decide to have a conversation, depending on how the season goes. I think anything short of 6 wins, even 7, I would like to have that conversation to say, hey, Bill, it's been a great run. You're probably going to be the greatest head coach of all time, but you just don't have it anymore, and we need to go a different direction. For the Bills, this is a war of attrition, and these injuries may be too much to overcome. They're 4-3. They're, again, a game back of Miami. They do have the tiebreaker, but they have to go down to Miami later this year to get that divisional win back. So I have my question marks yet again after they looked so good maybe 2-3 weeks ago. I think that the Bills may just have too many injuries unless they make some big moves at the trade deadline. We're going to see them barely get into the playoffs, but it's just not going to be it for them this year. Last week, I was pretty hard on Desmond Ridder, and he didn't do himself any favors in this game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, they did win the game in the Atlanta Falcons 16-13 thanks to a last-minute field goal by Younghoe Koo, but the problem is that Desmond Ridder had 2 chances to score, and he fumbled at the goal line. The first time was a mishandled snap, but it's at the 1 yard line, even inside the 1 yard line. All you have to do is handle the snap, and most likely you're going to get a touchdown to get some breathing room. In one, he had a quarterback run that was heading towards the left pylon, and it seemed that he slowed down and it allowed Antoine Winfield to get back into the play and swipe at the ball. Very close. But it turned out that he fumbled before the ball broke the plane, and that went out the back of the end zone for a touchback, turnover, Tampa Bay ball. These turnovers are devastating. Red zone turnovers, like I said, are the cardinal sin of football. You just can't have that when you're so close, because it's just so demoralizing when you work all the way down the field and you can't even get 3 points to settle for that. Coming up empty in the red zone sucks, and it's very, very tough for a defense to say, like, well, you're putting us again in a bind. We were supposed to have numbers and points to defend, but now you're asking us to get a stop again and again. Thankfully, they were able to do so. Baker Mayfield hasn't looked that great after that 3-1 start. They are now 3-3 with this loss. Definitely some things to look for in this NFC South division. It doesn't seem that any team is going to be really a true playoff contender right now. Atlanta is 4-3. And they're leading the NFC South, but it doesn't mean that they're going to make a deep run. I think whoever comes out of this division is going to be probably the 4th seed in the NFC playoffs, and then they're going to unfortunately just be a lame duck for whoever is that top wildcard team in the 5th seed. So that could be Dallas, that could be Seattle, for all we know. I think both of those teams are far more talented. They're far better run organizations than any of the teams in the NFC South. Yes, it's nice, but at least for Atlanta, I've been saying this for a couple weeks now, but Desmond Ridder just doesn't seem to be the guy. I like his story, but just not a starting quarterback in this league as of yet. Just too many turnovers, poor decision making, and they just have way too many weapons on the outside to be struggling like this offensively. Tyrod Taylor might be making his case to be the New York Giants starting quarterback for this season. I mean, the last couple games, excluding that one red zone mismanagement where he just lost track of time, and that led to the New York Giants having an empty trip before the end of the first half. He's looked a lot better in his second start of the year. I mean, a lot of nice deep balls, especially with the new rookie Jalen Hyatt, who I think his growth was being diminished, or just it's not progressing as what we'd like it to be in the first 7 games of the year because of Daniel Jones and his ineptitude and his lack of ability to really run Brian Daboll's offense. We know that Tyrod has been a solid backup. He's been kind of a journeyman in this league, but any time that his number is called upon, he's able to answer the bell. He's battled injuries and has been a guy that's been probably overlooked, but he's always been a solid quarterback that doesn't need to do too much to get teams to win and doesn't make a ton of mistakes. That happened again against the Washington Commanders, who I thought are still a pretty solid team. That defense can make some damage, but big credit to Tyrod Taylor for managing this game and even doing his part as a quarterback to lead the New York Giants to a much needed win. They were 1-5 heading into this matchup, and now they're back at 2-5. Nothing great, but also a step in the positive direction, because with Saquon back, this offense has an extra dimension. But it wasn't easy for these two teams. Again, this is a divisional game. Anything can be had. All bets are off, right? And there was some big contributions from this really deep D-line for the New York Giants. We have Kayvon Thibodeau, we have Dexter Lawrence, and then Leonard Williams. They all combined for 4.5 sacks of Sam Howell, as he endured a beatdown of 6 sacks on the day. And Sam, I think, was definitely rattled. When he gets hit, like we saw against the Buffalo Bills, he turns over the ball. And that's a young quarterback making young mistakes. This is essentially his rookie year. This is his first time having a full audition as being the starting quarterback. It's certainly been tough the last few weeks, but I don't think this is anything to really knock on Sam Howell's development and anything to consider him being the long-term starter in DC. Washington had some opportunities to make this a tighter game. It was close throughout. I mean, it was 14-7, but a missed kick that was blocked, actually, that's 27 yards out. That should be a gimme. And that just took points off the board again, demoralizing empty red zone trip. And they were able to get a little bit of juice thanks to forcing a turnover against Saquon Barkley at the goal line, but couldn't turn it into anything significant. They lose 14-7, and now after starting 2-0, they are now 3-4. That means they've dropped 4 of their last 5 games. Just not looking that great. I mean, we talked about new ownership. New ownership is trying to make moves, right? They've acquired this team. They're trying to get fans interested in the Washington franchise yet again. Their deal with the FedEx Field could be coming to an end. They might look at returning to DC or going to Northern Virginia, but we'll see what happens over there. It's going to be very tricky times in DC. Definitely a positive thing for the New York Giants getting a win. But either way, both of these teams, I don't think are going to make a lot of noise. It's just more like developmental years for both franchises. The Chiefs simply have the Los Angeles Chargers number. That duo of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, I mean, they wreak havoc on this poor LA Chargers defense. Every time I see these two teams go head to head, I'm just curious what the stat line is between these two players, because again, Patrick Mahomes went off for 424 yards, 4 touchdowns, and then Travis Kelce had 12 catches for 179 yards. The two combined for their 50th touchdown combination, that it's already the 4th most between quarterback and tight end. They're probably the best duo in the NFL, and they'll make any defense look silly, but they just go to a whole different level, especially against the LA Chargers. Justin Herbert, I think he's done everything he can to make this a game, but even so, poor decisions at times and just the lack of being consistently a well-run organization. It's tough. It's very, very tough, because when you have Brandon Staley, who hangs his hat as a defensive-minded coach, he gets shredded. The defense has talent out of the wazoo, but they just cannot find ways to stop this Chiefs offense. Again, no easy feat, but every time I see these two teams, I know what's going to happen, just no matter what the score is going to be and what the stat line is going to be. Right now, the Chargers are 2-4. It will take a lot of rallying, but this AFC playoff race is very, very tight, and I just don't think they have a lot of room for error. They may miss out on the playoffs, and like I said before, it should cost Brandon Staley his job, and if so, it should have just happened sooner rather than later. We need some new voices for Justin Herbert. If it doesn't work with the new coach, then we have to question Justin Herbert, but I just don't think this is entirely on Justin Herbert. This is more of a Chargers organization issue more than anything. Huge matchup on Sunday Night Football. We had Miami traveling up to Philadelphia. This is Tua versus Jalen Hurts. Very, very historic meeting right there, because those are the two quarterbacks from Alabama. We know that back in 2018, Jalen wasn't playing the greatest against Georgia. He was benched for Tua, and Tua led the comeback for Alabama to win a national championship. He was a big reason why Alabama was able to get back into that game, and without him, it would have been very tough, but credit to Jalen at that moment. Sunday Night Football brought an enticing matchup between Miami and Philadelphia. This is two high-powered offenses. This is the two former Alabama quarterbacks in Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts, who was benched for Tua in that 2018 national championship game. He threw the game-winning touchdown pass to Devontae Smith, and this game is littered with Alabama and Georgia players. I had my concerns for Philly coming into this game. They were missing their two safeties and their slot cornerback, and against that receiving core with Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and a bunch of other receivers, plus Raheem Mostert out of the backfield, it's very dangerous that this team could go off against a team that is riddled with injury. But thankfully, they were able to impose their will, especially the defensive line early and late. And then offensively, they were able to wear down the Miami defense, which we'll talk about a little bit later. This is a great game for Sean Desai. I think that Sean has been a great help for this Philly defense, doing a lot more with less. We've seen that a couple times that, yes, they can be moved on, they can be scored on in the first halves, but after halftime, we see that Sean Desai makes adjustments. Against the LA Rams, they were getting moved up and down the field for 14 points with Puka Nacua, Matthew Stafford, and the return of Cooper Kupp. Second half, defense pitches a shutout. You get a lot of sacks, a lot of pressure, and that changes the complexity of the game. Similarly happened again on Sunday night, where even in the first half, Miami only scored 10 points. 3 of them came on a short field due to a Jalen Hurts turnover, and only one time were they ever allowed to drive the full length of the field for a touchdown. That was the only score that they had in this game, and Philly's defense limited Miami's offense to 10 points. Philly's defense, if they're playing like this with injuries to their secondary, they are going to be a big threat. I think that they were able to limit such a highly potent offense, especially one like Miami, who put up 70 points on an NFL team. That's a big win. That's a big feat for Sean Desai and his defensive staff. And just the defense is looking very good. Overall, this defense is looking pretty good. The Eagles offense, yes, Jalen had 2 turnovers. The strip sack, I'm going to blame him 100%. Not a lot of pocket awareness there. Should have been more careful. 2 hands on the football. But the pick 6 was a deflection that was just bounced into the hands of a waiting linebacker, taken back to the house. That's tough. But these turnovers for Jalen are definitely concerning to me. They're beginning to pile up. He has 7 interceptions, and then he has a few lost fumbles as well. Already a career high in turnovers, and we're only 7 games into the season. We can dissect whether or not they were all his fault, not his fault, whatever the case may be. They're showing up in the stat sheet, and it's a very big concern. But let's talk about the pass catchers. Dallas Goedert, always going to be that safety valve as a tight end, and it's his National Tight End Day after all. On Sunday at least, we saw Travis Kelce have a good game, and Dallas Goedert had a pretty solid game himself. He had a touchdown, his longest touchdown of the year, and I really like seeing these tight end screens, especially just giving the ball to Dallas and having offensive linemen run down the field. We saw Jordan Mailata basically escort Dallas Goedert to the end zone. Very good stuff from that. If you get these offensive linemen with a head of steam, it's very hard for any defense to defend them. AJ Brown, he is playing like a top 2 receiver. We saw on the other side Tyreek Hill. He's on pace for maybe breaking 2,000 yards. He might do so, but I think AJ Brown could be right there. He might not get to 2K. I think maybe 1,700, 1,800 is very much in a possibility of his range, just based on the pace that he's playing. 5 consecutive games, having over 125 yards receiving. And I mean, this guy just has the chemistry with Jalen Hurts. He knows when to break off his route and find open holes in the zone. He's so strong. He attacks the ball so hard that it's so hard for defensive backs to play off of him. He's big, he's strong, fast, everything you want in a receiver. And if he's doing this on a consistent basis, I know he's getting a lot of slack after that Vikings game, even being called out by Donovan McNabb that the offense doesn't look the same because he's asking or he's getting targeted too much. Right now, I just want to feed him the ball because he's making the most of those opportunities. If that isn't happening, if he's covered, okay, we have Devontae Smith, we have Dallas Goedert, and now we have Julio Jones. Surprisingly, a little bit of a backstory, and surprisingly, we have Julio Jones. He was signed to the practice squad earlier last week. He's going to be with the team for the foreseeable future. I think is a great veteran presence. Obviously has ties to AJ Brown back to their days in Tennessee. We'll see how much Julio has left in the tank. I'm a huge fan of Julio Jones. I don't know what his capability will be, what his contributions to this team will be, but it's nice to have a guy of his caliber. Based on the lore and his past experience, he can contribute something. Not asking him to be 100% what he used to be. If he can even give 50% of what he used to be, that's a win for the Eagles. Going back to defense, want to talk about Hassan Reddick. He's known to be an edge rusher, getting after the quarterback. And this time, he dipped back into those days that he used to play in Arizona. He was coached to be a little bit more of an edge setter rather than an edge rusher. That means you're setting the edge, you're closing off that edge, so quarterbacks that like to run on the edge or running backs that like to bounce it outside, they can't. They have to bounce it back inside. Raheem Mostert is very much like that type of back who likes to bounce outside, and there just simply was no running room available. Hassan Reddick and the defensive line was able to corral Raheem Mostert to a total of -7 rushing yards after halftime. Raheem got loose in the second half, but it wasn't really a big impact in that part of the game. So minimal damage done by Raheem Mostert, and Miami was the top-ranked rush offense in the NFL. They were completely shut down, and the Eagles have one of the best rush defenses in the NFL. So that was a win for the Eagles there. That's going back to the secondary. Again, this is credit to Sean Desai and his staff, but Darius Slay had an interception. Big play right there because the Dolphins are running. Big credit to the secondary. I mean, limiting Tyreek Hill to 88 yards receiving off of 11 catches. Yes, he literally ran by James Bradbury in the left side of the Eagles secondary before halftime. That's what he'll do. You're going to get those plays. He's just so fast. But to limit him for 11 catches for 88 yards, that's a huge win. Darius Slay had that interception, big momentum play right there, because if they're able to score on that, that would have evened up the game. But that's able to keep momentum with Philly's side. And that turned the game upside down, because when the Eagles had possession, they were able to grind out a nice long drive, get an insurance touchdown to go up 31-17, and that was it from there. Miami was just too worn down, too tired, did not have the ball enough on offense to get in rhythm consistent to rally from a 14-point deficit with under 4 minutes left. And the Eagles win. The Eagles proved to be the more physical team. They dominated the trenches, and that is what I think Miami's Achilles heel is. If you can get physical with them, they can be exposed as a finesse team. So I love these concepts that Mike McDaniels runs. There was a lot of trickery that we saw even in Sunday night against the Eagles, but a lot of these things don't really translate to consistently winning. You'll beat the bad teams, because you look at their 5 wins, not a lot of great teams that they beat there. You shouldn't be punished for winning, but you also shouldn't be celebrated for beating bad teams. So Miami has some work to do like other teams, but I think the biggest thing for them is they do need to get healthy. Achane will be back later this season after being on IR with that knee injury. But I think the issues on the offensive line, especially with those injuries, they're going to have to look into bolstering that up and boosting the physicality there. The Eagles have 2 more games before their bye week. I'm concerned about Jalen, the turnovers, but also this knee injury that he picked up. We'll see the extent of what the knee is and what the damage is, but I hope that he can sustain good play for the next 2 weeks and then just take some time in the bye week. They have Washington and Dallas, 2 key divisional games, and they're going to need Jalen at close to 100% to get those 2 wins and go into the bye week at 8-1. That is the goal. Coach Sirianni talked about the luxury of having the tush push, the brotherly shove at his disposal. I mean, think about it. It's like having 1st and 9, because the Eagles can get that last yard or 6 inches or so because they have the best offensive line, a quarterback that can squat 600 pounds. It's a match made in heaven. And if the Eagles continue to run this play, I know teams are trying to lobby for this play to get banned. I mean, it's not happening this year. It shouldn't happen at all. We'll see what happens, but it's just such a good testitude to how good this team is, especially in the trenches. Some breaking news coming out of the NFL. Kevin Byard has been traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, and this helps shore up a secondary that is missing Justin Evans, their starting safety, and then Reed Blankenship, who has been banged up a couple times this year with rib injuries. Since entering the league, Kevin Byard has been amongst the top 3 in interceptions, and he is a ball hawk. I think he still has a little bit left in that tank to give the Eagles what they need in terms of being a guy that can cover, be center fielder for the Eagles, especially when they have these injury issues at the safety position. I think he's a great leader as well. He's been known to be very demonstrative, and being part of the secondary is going to bolster what they have. I mean, they need that. They need his help. And I think he'll be a significant contributor to this Eagles defense as we get into the mid to latter part of the 2023 NFL season. And Howie Roseman does it again. I mean, it's a 5th round pick this year and a 6th round pick, and that's a bargain for a guy of Kevin Byard's caliber. And then to talk about Monday Night Football, San Francisco drops its 2nd straight game. Brock Purdy is not looking like what he used to be leading up to this game. After starting off his career 10-0, he's dropped 2 consecutive games, and we're seeing now maybe this narrative of him not having a great surrounding cast is hurting him. But Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, those are 2 All-Pros, very hard to replace that production. I don't think that is on him in terms of protection and pass catching. But those 2 interceptions that he had to basically seal the deal for the Minnesota Vikings to get this win, I think were on Brock Purdy. Those 2 passes were off target, basically straight to Bynum, the cornerback who made those plays. Credit to him for doing so. And right now, it's definitely a little shaky right now in San Francisco, dropping 2 consecutive games, both on the road. You are looking up in the standings. You used to be the top amongst power rankings, and you used to be undefeated 2 weeks ago. But now you are the 3 seed in the NFC, behind even Detroit and a game back of the Philadelphia Eagles. Remember that San Francisco will have to go on the road to Philly to play them later this year. That's a big test. So I have my concerns with San Francisco. I think a lot of these issues about the quarterback position, the injuries are definitely piling up. They're going to have to go back and make some changes. But let's just also talk about Jordan Addison. He is stepping up for Justin Jefferson, who is out for a few games due to a hamstring injury. He's going to be on IR. And Jordan Addison has stepped up tremendously in his place, especially on Monday night. He had 7 catches for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. And in the first rep, he's going against Tre'Davious Ward. Tre'Davious Ward is a great cornerback, very physical as well. Out-wrestled Jordan Addison for an interception on the first drive. That's a 50-50 play. That's not entirely on Jordan Addison nor on Kirk Cousins. But after that, Jordan Addison dominated the 49ers secondary, who has a lot of good names, a lot of talent, but this guy single-handedly beat this team. There was an instant where him and Ward were going head-to-head yet again, but he simply wrestled the ball free from Ward's grasp and was able to take it for a touchdown, 60-yard bomb. Very impressed by what he can do. I think this is only scraping the surface of his potential, and if he's doing this and can replicate it whenever Justin Jefferson returns to the starting lineup, I think this is going to be wonderful for the Minnesota Vikings offense. Now, they're 3-4, nothing great, but they have been looking better ever since their poor start earlier this year. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Sorry to keep it short, but that's the best we can do given the circumstances right now. But you guys know what to do. If you're new to the channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. And you can get the audio from this episode on Spotify. All links are in the description. Thank you so much to Joey for editing this podcast, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.